Hello, everyone, and welcome to the All Stats No Res podcast, where today we're going to be answering a very important question. How did Blizzard Entertainment mess up so bad on Warcraft 3 Reforged? Who wants to start?
Oh, dude. They were just greedy. You had a 10 out of 10 product where all they had to do was, at worst, increase the amount of units you could select, and they fucking botched it. They got greedy. They fucked the designers. They fucked everyone.
Wait a minute.
Would you say it's the most egregious cash grab of all time?
Yes.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Something's off here. Isn't this supposed to be a Dominions podcast?
You mean the premier Dominions 5 podcast for the multiplayer community? I guess so.
That's the one.
All right. Shall we get back on track?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so actually today's episode is going to be about the water magic path.
We are joined today by me, HpMunchcraft, Charlie, Soron, and Rovsea. Unfortunately, our resident Dark Wolf is missing, so let's all give out a howl for him.
Pogger dog.
Yeah, we could start with Pogger Dog.
Pogger Dog for an entire school of magic?
That's how I
Exactly.
It's
isn't it?
Because you have to use it, right? It's a resource.
Yeah.
Even though I think it's dog just because.
Yeah, you have to use witch hunters too.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to use witch hunters too. We had a whole conversation about that one, didn't we?
So Charlie, you say it's dog. It's one of the worst paths, so it's dog. Is that correct?
I think it needs some buffs. So in that sense, I would say it's dog. But of course, I'm still going to use water magic on the nations that have it available to them. So
I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go the Pog side. Even though I think we agree that it's like one of the weakest paths, but you still use it, I think that the reason why I'm saying it's Pog is because it's an entire magic path, and there's a lot of good shit you can do with it. And I think that like the ranking of magic paths has been a little bit. People love to do it because people love to make ranks and lists and shit, but it really like cuts people off from understanding the game and how to succeed. So I'm going with Pog.
Water is dog, and the reason it is dog is not because it's not useful. It's because when you go underwater and you fight, the design of the water magic path, I think it's designed in such a way that it's not great for the state of the game for fighting underwater. It's so necessary underwater that it completely warps how land and water nations interact together. And, I think it's maybe the root cause for that entire dynamic.
I'd agree. Soron?
All right, I'm gonna try to address Rov's point, but also give my opinion. So I'm actually a Pog for water. If the question was about fire magic, I'd say dog all day, but I think water is actually better than fire, which is kind of weird for Dominion, mostly because of buff spells. Because cubes exist in the game, I'm pro water. If they didn't exist, I would say water magic is dog shit. Because they exist, I'm definitely pro water.
What if cubes were like a nature primary with a water cross path? Does that change it?
What are you trying to do?
That's literally just make nature water
even stronger.
Please,
why would you? What are you trying to do, man?
Blizzard, do not do that. For the love of God, do not. That would be so awful.
Deleting water from the game.
That would be the worst change ever. But no, I'd say water because they have quickness, they have cubes, they have water elementals. They don't really have a lot of good battlefield-wide water spells outside of like Quagmire and Grip. I've talked a lot. With the guys on here about it, and they're like, "Oh, you have big water," and I'm like, "Yeah, where are you gonna fucking cast?"
Listen, Soron, if you just have Ryan,
fuck Ryan.
Fucking murdering Wintat Lamau.
Yeah, murdering Winter is good if you have the skills, but the big to address Rob's point, underwater would be so much better if one the entire meta wasn't just water elementals. And Encased in Ice should be deleted from the game. Hot take. And a bunch of spells that don't function underwater should just work underwater. Don't there's even if we made those changes to the game, let's say it happened tomorrow, underwater would still be dog shit, and you should still ban it because of how the interaction between land and water works. So don't think
think about
the spells are the.
It's also the forging. It's not just the spells.
Well, yeah, the
forging because you need the water breathing items, right?
Yeah, the water breathing stuff should honestly be in Holy if I could make that change, and all the items should be free. I think
you can just go whenever.
So do we want to?
You just removed this blunder from Illwinter's design. Just fucking rip it out of the game. Fucking full force.
Well, I don't think they considered the greater ramifications on the multiplayer community.
Make it better for single player too.
That's cool.
I think that with a few balance changes, just a few coastal rec changes and add some amphib to some land nations, and making the underwater breathing shit cheaper. I think that there would be a big change. What?
Oh, God.
Give back Gift of Water Breathing to the water path.
Agreed.
Yeah, but what if you're Abyssia?
Give people coastal water recruit indies, water mage indies.
Agreed.
That would certainly.
Yeah, that would actually
water really has Gift of Water Breathing.
Yeah, but then you would have to spend gems to do it. Oh, that's so dog shit still.
Just
make it free.
No, you wouldn't. No, the water mage that you find from the Indie province, which is more likely to spawn on the coast, would have Gift of Water Breathing because it's on the mage.
What are we giving him? 40?
20, 40,
something I don't know, 10 per path. Lamau.
Yeah,
that wouldn't fix it either because then you would get the morale. So you'd now get the morale penalty, and in addition to the dog shit design choice of poor amphibian. Oh God! What?
I think it's better than your
all right, this is a lot less to do with the water path than it does with underwater.
But it does deal with it.
So to get back on track of the water path, let's talk about how, and I think Soron brought this up, and Rob brought it up as well. I think as one of his reasons why it was a dog, is that the water path has to play double duty because the water path is the main underwater combat path where it is basically busted and undefeated
until almost you have to get
until the far late game
have competition,
and then it also has on land water spells which are, I don't want to say underwhelming, we'll get into it later, but it's definitely a constricted design space because of all those underwater only spells that exist in the path.
If you had more battlefield spells rather than the two I listed in, we're not including Murdering Winter. Murdering Winter is a great spell. No one's probably gonna dispute that in here. Granted, it's 40 gems.
Yeah.
But it's just the stuff that you can do in fights. You have your fatigue stuff, but then it's you have water elementals, and then there's quickness and cubes.
If I could,
Frozen Heart.
And then there's the thaumaturgy stuff, but I don't know if
I could.
There is nothing in thaumaturgy, Soron. Go look at it. There's nothing.
Hold on. If I could maybe summarize what's wrong with the water path, I would say the water path has no real mid-game power spike that carries the path. Air has air elementals. Water elementals are not as good.
No, water elementals are great though, and especially underwater.
Yeah, but they're not the mid game power spike that
they are in some cases versus
the air elementals.
If you're a water nation, it completely warps the underwater matchup to have them earlier than your opponent, right?
The underwater matchup, but on land.
Do we want to separate out the conversation into an underwater and the land section, or
we're kind of
still good on land? I would say that they're the same as air elementals. Honestly, they just do different roles.
I would say air elementals is a much stronger power spike.
I think air elementals are better.
I don't think elementals are dog shit versus giants. But you also wouldn't use them versus giants.
They don't have
just like you wouldn't.
This is debatable because fire is
Fire's
also
far
a
worse
bad
than
path,
water.
or Seeded's a bad path, but Fire has flaming arrows and flaming arrows into heat from hell into firestorm. I don't think there's a snowstorm. Maybe there should be.
There
You know,
should be.
nature has
the closest thing is like Needful Flame.
They should add Blizzard or something to the game.
Yeah,
That
why
would be cool.
not? Just
Yeah,
a better.
that's my
Winter.
main point. Is like it feels like there's just some missing spells. Like even accounting for the, having to do double duty underwater and on land, it still feels like it's kind of light. Like the roster's a little light.
Yeah,
Do
I
we-
mean, you should be able to make it snow and then be able to cast snow spells or ice spells instead of having the temperature shit. I think that would be
Winter
cool.
the province and Cast Rain is the clan.
Yeah, no, but snow sucks.
It doesn't do anything. That's true.
It actually does jack shit. Like if you Woven Winter your province,
Group of wintering.
if
I mean,
anything, you're doing that as the offender because ice elementals aren't good.
Yeah.
If you let
that's
people
true.
like stack cold, where you, I guess maybe in Dom 6 you get more cold stacks, but if you let people like hit Woven Winter provinces and then the making rain in that snow province made it snow and then like did a combat debuff on everyone without snow move, and then you could add that together and then have like a blizzard spell that's like,
I mean, look at
Firestorm,
Storm
that's
and
like Ice Storm or Hailstorm, and that just like did a bunch of cold damage to people. Then that would be very, very strong, and they kind of lack that.
Yeah.
I mean, Storm has Wrathful Skies interaction. Like, why not have something like that?
Yeah.
Acid Rain.
I agree.
That's a
they do have
cross-path
acid
spell.
rain,
That-
and water
that- it
does
is
have some
cross-path.
good-
Yeah, but that's a hard
Like-
crosspath to come across. It's super uncommon.
And the water fire crosspath is a
Yeah.
very, very good
Oh,
crosspath.
yes and no.
They
You have the
Illwinter
Stygian stuff as well.
Illwinter respects enemy paths in this game.
Yeah.
So like in the elements at least. So water, fire, and air, earth are abnormally strong crosspaths in general. And the water, fire gets you a Staff of Elemental Mastery, gets you the acid line of spells, which are very strong.
Rune Smasher.
Yeah, and get you Rune
Manifest
Smasher,
Vitriol?
which is a
Manifest
very it's just plus
Vitriol?
2 pen, which is.
But I
better
think they're
than
strong
what-
because they're kind of more uncommon. So
Yeah.
that's what it feels like anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the generic water spell should be better, but I also think generic water is still better than generic fire.
Is it?
Yes,
I mean-
yes, absolutely. Like
I would
all
say
you-
generic water is a better combat path than generic fire.
It's
however,
better for buffing, but I think it's worse in
However,
most
I
other
think
ways.
water
cubes
and
just counter
fire
fire elementals
are
like,
best as support paths, not main paths, unless you're fighting underwater specifically. And as a support path, the lantern makes the fire a better support path.
I think the reason that fire would be worse than water is because there aren't that many strong cold damage water spells.
I mean,
Whereas it's like all that fire does, so fire gets countered worse by having resistance.
I also think it's because of how most of the fire damage in the game is calculated. It's like flat versus prot, and it's not always AN. And most of the water, I think more of the water stuff is AN. I could be
there's
wrong.
There's one that's just straight up physical damage for some reason, and it's really late in the tech tree too, because why not?
What, like
Ice Strike, right? No, Ice Strike. It's pretty bad. But I think Falling Frost is also not even AN. But like Freezing Mist is. Needful Flames is. Needful Flames is a good spell, by the way.
Well, if you can get to level 9 and cast
Yeah,
it,
if
absolutely.
you can get to level 9.
The problem is it exists in level 9.
But I
Imagine
think
Dominion 6.
there's also just some schools that like there's just no good water spells in Thaumaturgy, right? Like, what
no,
do you
that's
have?
not true. Okay, I'll
You have
disagree.
Sailor's
I'll
Death.
agree
You have
with
Sailor's
that.
Death, right? And then you have Vengeful Water.
Curse of the Desert is like if you. So I thought you were right. I would have agreed with you like 2 weeks ago, and then I talked to Seventh Path about this, and the desecration effect is actually kind of nasty. So Curse of the Desert, I actually think is a good spell, and I also think Sailor's Death is a good spell. And Numbness, interesting enough, in Alteration, if it's cold, it's a good spell. But if it's not cold, Numbness is dog shit. And most players will run heat, so Numbness is not an option. But Curse of the Desert is a good spell. especially for rigor mortis play, I would actually disagree with you.
You definitely have a
Slow is
wider
a bad
variety
spell
of
because it's
tools
pushing.
in water than you have in fire. Like Fire's got like 3 things it does. Like
Yeah,
Direct AP fire damage.
Yeah.
times
Dude,
5,
it
and
should
then, like,
buff.
2 other things.
Oh, dude, there should be some buff fire spells. At least like water has quickness. Like that's why I kind of
Wave
like
Warriors, Liquid Body is a good one.
Yeah, like fire should like have something with like I like what Red Rob did with like the attack skill, but like he also added like fire shield that you can give to soldiers.
Yes.
So
And
like
there's
I
a
think it's
spell
starting
buff
to.
with Fire Shield and stuff too.
I don't know if I like his changes 1-to-1, but I like that he gave buffs in general. Ilwinter could do something else as long as it's like a buff that matters. I would leave up the decision to them if they were going to add one, but they should add one. If the community,
I would be happy to see other disabling spells too. That's perfectly fine with me.
What do you mean?
They have blindness, but blindness is like a single target spell or something.
What were you going to say, Charlie?
I was just going to say, on the subject of water buffs as well, like I like Wave Warriors, but you can really feel that -4 Strength Malice, like that debuff.
yeah.
Well,
It's just
you're
kind of
not paying
indicates it's a microcosm of like what, like water should be slightly better. I feel like.
You have to know what you're using troops for with
Yeah.
Wave Warriors. I feel what you're going for there because with regards to buffs, they are a support path, not a main buff path. Like, if you already have a main buffing path, then quickness and quickening are excellent support buffs.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a main buffing path and you're just trying to buff with water, it's gonna feel like dog shit. You need astral or nature or earth, and if you don't have those, it's like, well,
I mean, I would argue that like no matter what, you're always gonna have N1, which gives you protection at worst. So it's not ideal, but it's not as bad as I think you're leading it on to be. I think it's very usable.
On the subject of Wave Warriors, it's also AoE 5. So the expense of casting it, aside from just needing to have water 3s, if you want to cover more than like 3 squares, goes up pretty quick.
I mean, Wave Warriors is best with Moss Body because you get that combo.
right.
Yeah.
So
almost by necessity, it has to be on a small number.
I wish there was a bigger AoE Moss Body spell, but I know that
I don't
like a 5, like AoE 5, I think would be fine.
I know where you're coming from, but I kind of like the fact that is just like a super strong buff that you don't ever get a big version of. Like I disagree highly with like the DE thing where it's like, oh, there has to be a small, medium, and large version of every spell, and it's like, no, let's some.
Well, that's not.
There's no large version of Moss Body in DE because it kept crashing the game.
Yeah, so it's like so the reason why it isn't in the game is because it crashes it. I think they fixed that problem at this point, but
Jesus Christ.
DE doesn't do that for people who don't play DE. DE does other egregious stuff that we probably will not talk about in this episode, but that's not one of them.
So back to the water path.
Path's so bad we don't even have anything
so,
to talk
real
about.
quick, you said desiccation is decent in thaumaturgy, like the effect.
Yeah, the effect is really good.
But it's definitely not a power spike defining.
No, it isn't. But like Curse of the Desert is actually real. Like just cast it in a fight. It's you get it off once, and
I agree. I like that effect.
And so if you're doing like rigor mortis,
I'm a water main nation. I'm not going down thaumaturgy. There's like other stuff I need to be getting. Like first, I mean,
it's a supporting spell for rigor play. So,
but you need water 3s to cast it, right?
You can gem it with the spell.
Yeah, but
later in the game it becomes very easy to cast. But later in the game, it's like you have better things to do with your life.
I mean, Sailor's Death is also respectable damage if that goes off. So I don't think it's like completely as bad as I used to think it was. So
probably a little underrated, sure.
I mean, water also has one of the most toxic globals in the game, Vengeful Waters.
Vengeful Waters is some good shit.
Yeah, I think the globals are good for sure.
It's kind of what
some of them are, but some of them are like impossible. The hardest spell to cast in the game is Celestial Rainbow.
Reading Rainbow.
Oh yeah.
Well, Water Nature did not need any fucking help, so like.
Listen,
deal with having the uncast.
Water 7 and 5, pretty hard to cast.
Before someone flames you guys in the comments, yes, we are aware that demon cleansing exists. We also aware it's a level 9.
I was gonna say that is another issue with water, again being the support path and not a main path. It's like demon cleansing is a great spell. It's a great hoser. Like fucks over all demons. But like if your opponent is playing demons into your water main nation, you know, like rain, it's great. Fucks over the entire fire path. Very very cheap.
Rain shouldn't exist. Hot take.
But it's not like a positive spell that you like push for to get a power spike on people. It's like reactive, and like you know.
Unironically, rain like
isn't
so
fire on a
easy.
lower tier just because rain exists?
Yeah, it's so easy to cast. By
it
the way,
shouldn't
that
exist in the game.
when they increased the difficulty to cast by both the research level and the path level, one of the beta testers for Dominion 6 didn't even notice that it was harder to cast. That's how easy it is to cast in Dominion 5. The quickest and probably the easiest battlefield effect in the entire game to cast.
It should honestly have a different effect. The fact that it completely ruins fire and this effect is not for any other magic school in the game is like ridiculous. Like they should completely rework the spell to where like maybe it increases the power of water spells, or it just gives you a flat +1 and it's a level 5 or something. It should not completely cock fire because it's so bad.
It just halves the number of fire spells you can cast in a battle, or, and this is even worse, if you're trying to cast, I don't know, your Fire Nation at some train scales, if you try to cast Fire Elemental with Rain Up, you can literally afflict your own Fire Mages just by casting Summon Fire Elemental.
It's just the
because it'll be over 200 fatigue. It's really ridiculous how badly it screws over fire magic plays.
Yeah.
But I did want to mention the one thing that I think sometimes fire and water path don't get mentioned about at all is that if you need a form of resistance for fire or water, heat or cold damage, you need one of those two paths. Some nations don't have them, and I think it's a legitimate weakness of their nations because they can be, they can be exploited in the mid game.
I mean, that is fair, but it's very much mitigated by the current stat res meta. If in Dominion 6, in the future meta or whatever, like resistances are less good or people just don't take them mindlessly all the time, then water gets a lot better because AN cold damage is very nasty. And if you've ever seen Frost Drakes actually blasting their little AoEs on enemies that don't have any cold res, it's kind of fucking gross. But
the only thing with those spells is they're heavy gems.
Yeah.
I do think the Drakes are worthwhile. We're in an all res meta, but they are 7 per 1. But you should cast them if it's like a legitimate answer that will help you through whatever situation you are in. They're not going to be good in all situations.
You can get 2 per cast of Construction 6 if you have Fire Magic.
Or Dragon Master or whatever.
Exactly. Super easy.
Just to let people know, the way to use Frost Drakes is the best way to use Frost Drakes is generally like if you notice that the enemy has neglected cold res and doesn't have it on their units, then you take a Frost Drake and you either have him in a fort where he's behind like skeletons that do have cold res or units you don't mind losing or swarm or something, or you build like a little rage cage for him so that he doesn't run at the enemy. What you want is your front line to hit first, and then your Drake, because it's undisciplined, you're going to have to physically trap it behind your front line, but you want it to run up after and to start shooting through your front line, and so that the wide part of the cone hits the enemy front line and just starts freezing units to death. Like, it really crisps them up, or really just snows them out over because it's it's
cloud,
AM
right?
damage, but that is a little bit of an advanced technique.
So HP, are you basically saying you got to jump through hoops to make them work?
Yeah, you have
That's
to.
how
You
stuff
gotta
works.
learn how to play the game. You gotta jump.
There's another issue you haven't mentioned, which is sometimes when they go to retarget something, they don't pick a very good target.
That's just the targeting AI.
Winter.
That is
Can we just Winter, please? Can we get animal?
But it's a
discipline on
reality you
Beastmasters?
have to work with.
I mean,
Wait,
disciplined on a frost drake would be absolutely insane. Holding fire
Maybe-
and make it actually good.
wait, hold on.
Yeah.
What did you say before that, Charlie? I didn't hear you.
I want animal discipline on Beastmasters.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was about to say.
I feel like if you could take it on your bless and get rid of undisciplined, I would run that shit.
I think
But they're not
Beastmasters are getting animal discipline in Dom 6. I think that was a leak.
What I'm trying to say, Charlie, is if you could take some sort of bless that allows your commanders leading an undisciplined unit to be disciplined, that would be a worthwhile bless, similar to inspirational
Agreed.
presence. That would actually be really good, because there's a lot of cool units in the game, like Mercata, that are in the Banderlog section, that had a lot of really cool tech in Dominions 3 that completely got eviscerated when they added Undisciplined. And I think Undisciplined is legitimately a terrible tag. One of the worst you can have in the game. It is a terrible
combination of the Undisciplined and the live, like the real-time aspect to it nowadays, that has made it a lot different. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It was definitely oversight. Like, it might have felt like a nonsensical change, like, oh, this makes sense. But I think Ilwinter should be almost soft-handed when they make such sweeping changes like this. Like, sometimes, they'll make a change. There's a bunch of changes Ilwinter makes that are very short-sighted, where they either are triple nerfing something, or they're making a big change that makes sense, but actually is really negative for the game. The best example, I think I mentioned it last week, was the scaling change. That was a terrible change that they made in the game that just needlessly nerfed a bunch of spells that weren't even being used. So they do this sometimes where they have a big change that affects a wide range of stuff, and some of it was not even necessary, and it just made it even worse. Like, if it wasn't seeing play now, it's really not going to see play after the change. So Elenter needs to be, in my opinion, a little, if you're going to make a change, make one, see how it's received. Then if you want to nerf it again.
Maybe they should get input from the community.
Instead of
well, okay, so not every change they make is going to be for balance reasons, but they do make balance changes. So, and some of those I'm a little confused about where they're coming from. Well, actually, no, we're not that confused because it's kind of.
Well, we know exactly where it's coming from.
Comment, and then
to be fair,
Charlie, we're still confused where it's coming from.
No.
There are a lot of
End's lion nerf. Where did that come from?
Oh, I know where that came from. People bitched about that immediately. In's Lions were good when they first came out with them, and people complained about it because people were using it as a first order optimal strategy. Just I have infinite lions, and people bitched about it, and then they got double nerfed.
Yeah, but look at freaking Scalaria. People have been complaining about Scalaria for 6 years. Okay, I don't see Scalaria.
Complaining longer. Aishi, are we gonna burn this bridge?
What? Which bridge are you gonna burn?
Okay. I think we should probably, and this is just a hypothetical. Get back to the water path.
Listen, I want to hear the incendiary comment from Soron.
All right, let's hear the incendiary comment, and if it's too spicy for YouTube, I can edit it out.
For those of you who don't know, the Ilwinter takes a lot of feedback from the beta testers. One of the beta testers in particular will make a lot of suggestions that might make sense lore-wise, but are absolutely terrible changes that were not necessary. An example of this is the Killer Mantis change, where they no longer, for whatever reason, do not have magic weapons. This is a change made by the player Zonk, who is very active on the forums. And sometimes he makes absolutely terrible recommendations. I think I know. So I absolutely blame him for that.
I don't think that was too bad, and I agree. Some of the things that Zonk in particular, and I don't want to single him out because there's a lot of
singles ass out.
There's a lot of bad ideas in other parts of the community, but Zonk does has made a lot of changes that have been implemented that I have thought are like.
Let's not slander too hard here. He hasn't made changes. Illwinter has decided to
Yeah,
implement
Illwinter
some
has
of his
decided
suggestions.
based on his feedback. It was like the Mantis change that was part of the worst patch with half scaling, which a lot of people asked for it for Nazca because Nazca has one particular broken strategy.
Then it went across
and
the board.
then they triple nerf.
They made it a sweeping change.
They quadruple nerf Nazca, and now nobody even knows
Wait,
if they're strong.
Are you saying Zonk is the Grandma Wormtongue?
Yes.
No, he does not. Listen, that's what I didn't want to single him out because
I know.
The general community bitched about Ins Lions when they first came out, and they got changed, and things get changed.
Who complained about Ins Lions? They're freaking undisciplined animals with no.
Rob, if you weren't there, you don't know. People bitched up a storm.
I was
about
there.
Them.
I was there when Ins was
people bitched about them. They got changed. Naba used to have cheaper labs, I believe.
Okay, yeah.
And
deserved nerf.
Right, well, hold on. Naba still wouldn't be Scalaria level even if they still had the cheaper labs. The community bitched up a storm about that. It was changed. Community also bitched about Naba's gold site, even though that's fine.
No, it's not fine. They just start with 25% more income than everybody else.
Yeah, it's fine. They're still not an S tier nation. What of it?
Yeah, yes they are. Come on, man. The only thing
not,
preventing them from being S tier is the existence of Scalaria. Okay.
Well, I will. If you look at some of the problem nations like Nazca, Scalaria, right, that are actually broken, there's a lot of things.
I don't think Nazca's broken.
There's a lot of things that are down below that got bitched about by players that just didn't bring the nations up to the broken level, and it would have been totally fine to leave them in the game. They're more balanced with the mid-level of the middle age now that they don't have those quote-unquote broken things, but it would have been fine to leave them mid because they still aren't actually pushing the top end of the power level.
Did Scalaria even get touched once in Dominions 5?
Listen, Scalaria has been a staple since Dominions 3 and has somehow survived. Every change.
Did they get even a single balance change?
They did. When they changed how Reanimator priests work, you can no longer use Indie. Yeah, that was a balance change.
I'm saying from in the course of
5, I don't think Scalaria's been
when people realized just how strong they were in this version, did they ever get touched?
No. Listen, so if we want to be spicy and if we want to be stalkers, I recently discovered Illwinter's old YouTube account. And one of the people they follow...
I think we can leave that out.
One of the people they follow is General Confusion, right? And one of the early things that happened on General Confusion's YouTube channel is he took Machaka, he took flaming arrows, and he slapped the crap out of a Scalaria.
You think that's what painted their perspective on Scalaria?
I have no idea.
Did they know.
But it was it's the only thing that I can think of.
Scalaria gets to a point where they can literally lose 10 priests and 1,000 skeletons every single tournament fight.
Hey, you know what Scalaria doesn't have? The water path.
Oh yeah?
No, they do.
They do.
They do?
They do on the Ranthometer.
He's got a water random in there somewhere.
Yes, he does.
Death, air, astral water randoms.
So the water path is Paul.
Yeah.
Listen, water is better than fire.
Only the Scalaria paths are good. All the other ones don't need them. You can make an OP nation without them.
Looking at globals, right? Looking at the water globals, we have Maelstrom and Vengeful Waters, which are both very strong. Granted, Maelstrom you have to actually be underwater to cast, but Maelstrom is a rare global that not only does it give you a shitload of its own gem type, but it also gives you a trickle of other gem types. So it actually is has more utility than just water into water in the late game.
Yeah, it's a really strong gem.
Vengeful Waters is excellent, primarily with nations that have blood sack on their temples to just push out that Dom and then pop a Vengeful Waters when they've already got Dom in other people's territory.
Very strong as a defensive tool as well.
But then after that in water, you have a bunch of globals that are basically just nautical nonsense.
There's so many compared to how little spells the water path actually
Okay,
has.
so
There's many
I will
goals.
say Sea of Ice is a thing, and sometimes
Yes.
it can be effective, as some people here have experienced.
Yes,
Lamau.
I have, but it
Lamau.
again is just an interface. Sea of Ice and Thetis' Blessing, and even not Guardians of the Deep, but Lure of the Deep.
Guardians
to a
of the
certain
Deep. Has anybody here seen Guardians of the Deep?
No, I have
cast
not.
it. But like
Nope.
these globals are just a land-water interface that like exists to make that interaction happen. And they don't add anything to the path if it's all land nations or if it was all water nations. And then on that note, you have Guardians of the Deep, which is like
Wrath of the Sea.
Shittier Fata Morgana.
Why does Wrath of the Sea exist? It's like it feels like the person who would get griefed the most would be the water nation trying to control the coastline.
no, yeah, Wrath of the Sea is
Who is
very
the person who would cast the spell in the first place?
it's very funny because it seems like I have the water, now I screw the land spell. But if you think about it, it's actually something you want to cast from a lake far inland to fuck over whoever the water nation is on the
Exactly.
coast. But even then, it's not strong. It's 30% income
you
less.
don't need to be
like-
you don't need to be underwater to cast it.
Oh, you don't?
can
Yeah, you
cast
just cast it
wherever,
from land. You just cast it
Don't
from
forget the greatest water global of all, Ghost Meme Armada.
Did we skip Lore of the Deep? This doesn't seem that bad, but I've never
Lure
seen
of the Deep is okay, but it's like
It's like a worse Vengeful Waters for higher research.
it's I think it's cheap. What does it do?
Read it.
So it's good for Oceania because you get your sirens even cheaper as well, and then
It lures land commanders underwater and drowns
yes,
them.
where they can
But
drown.
it's just another land-water interface thing where it's like, yes, if
And
you're water, you can make
if
the
it's-
borders screw land, but
Doesn't
like,
matter.
If it's good, like if it's strong, in a situation where it's strong, it's probably among the most cancer spells in the game as well. Because it's just like, oh, your commander rolled a check, now he's dead. No save. Good luck.
I feel like a one-shot should... I don't know. Is a hot take saying that Vengeful Waters is bad for the game?
I
Is it
would
a
say
hot
that's
take?
a hot
Is
take
it?
because I don't think it's actually bad for the game.
It's not that bad for the game.
I think
because
it's
it's
cancer.
a really
when you-
strong water spell. But
I
Maybe
think,
the issue is assassins and not...
I mean, I think
That's fair.
Vengeful Waters is cancerous when you cast it, but I think it's like at a point in the late game where that's fine. And that's a hot take, but I think like, yeah, you cast Vengeful Waters, there's two ways of using it, an offensive way and a defensive way, depending on your dom spread. If
You're
you use
always
it
using it
defensively,
like it's always defensively
no, but
working because it kills scouts too. Right?
yeah,
Like,
okay.
You block
but-
scouting of yourself. It's
But what I'm saying is that you can push your dom out and then use it as an offensive weapon. Like, for example, if you're going to go for a throne rush, you push your dom out and then you hit it on the turn of or the turn before you're rushing, and then the enemy defenses are all in confusion because they get hit with a bunch of bullshit assassination. And so like you could use it in that manner as an offensive weapon. As a defense, it's fine. Like if someone wants to have that strong and cancerous of a defense in the late game, it's okay because as their opponent, you need to be looking for a way to go over the top anyway. And as offensive, it's fine-ish because it is a toxic way of doing it, but it is pushing the game towards a conclusion.
I feel like assassinations are only as good and as cancer because of how they function. And if Illwinter ever revamps assassinations,
which
and
will
they could
to an extent.
They could fuck it up because the only real positive I see with assassinations currently in the game is two things. Assassinations, they simplify scenarios, and they are super toxic, and they function in such a bad manner that it warps the game. I think I said I was going to say a positive about them.
Yeah, the assassin expansion is what you were going to say. I was waiting for it.
Yeah, so the only part of it, sorry, I don't know why my brain did that, but yeah, the only cool thing that assassinations currently do is versus indies, and I think that's the only thing Illwinter should if they ever rework it, should keep in mind. I think the interaction between assassinating indies and expanding is very well done. They shouldn't change how that works at all. But if they wanted to change it for how nations fight, I would maybe add some checks. But you wouldn't add those checks for independence, or else it wouldn't be this cool thing that exists in Dominions. It would just be something that's not optimal. And it's already kind of like 50-50 sometimes on the provinces that you can expand into, depending on the commanders. So I feel like Vengeful Waters going back circle is only so strong and toxic because of this assassination system. If you rework it and like guards show up more, or it just doesn't function in this 1v1 manner, I don't think it's
I mean,
to talk about it a little bit more, I think the main issue with assassination now, or one of the main issues, is that it's not just that the attacker in the assassination is all the initiative. It's that you're limited by the game mechanics and how much you can react to it as a defensive player, because you don't get a script for assassination battles. So even if you see that the person attacking you is going for a specific kit, while you can to some extent, try and put more bodyguards or do certain specific things, you can't like make a designed counter script for your mages, as an example. So it kind of removes some of the back and forth element that you might get in like the raid game from the assassin mini game, right?
I mean,
so it just makes it less interactive.
I think the big overarching problem with assassinations, just to link it right back into the water path with the bottled water, is that like, when you think of an assassination, you think of like, somebody popping through the window at night with a dagger to try to stab the mage or whatever. And then how assassinations actually function in multiplayer competitive Dominions is some jackass shows up to your bedroom and then just hawks a size 6 water elemental through, and then it just crushes you with its like massive AP wave attacks,
and then he strolls away like nothing happened.
Right or like a creepy forest lady shows up and throws just a massive amount of centipedes into your bed, or like a horde of skeletons rises up from the like actual floor and starts attacking you. Like it's
if we were to interpret the battle engine literally, why are all these commanders walking around alone at night or in the daytime?
Yeah. It's kind of
outside.
One might also wonder, Charlie, why when they run away to look for help, they instantly die as well.
Yeah, it's just assumed that the assassin catches up with them.
The goal for both sides to preserve strength, right, would be to get away, and yet that is the only absolute way to lose an assassination battle.
Yeah,
is to run first.
So what if the change is just like if they retreat, they do a check and they can actually survive?
What do you mean a check? They should just always live.
Yeah, they should always.
I think
they're in the middle.
I say a check because when you retreat from battle, there's also a check as well.
Yeah, but when you retreat from battle, you're not retreating into your own setup.
I think a fair thing to do would be to just have the retreat mechanic apply, right, for the assassination battle.
No, because then they can be leaving the province, which just doesn't make sense, right? They're not routed out of the province. They're routed back to the.
You might if the assassin gets between into you and your army, then you might have to leave the fucking town.
I don't like that change.
Oh, it's a little.
Either way,
it should stay in the same province. They
should be.
We should also state this that nerfing water bottles into the ground will not fix assassinations. It's the entire mechanic at large, and I don't want no one to
nerf all.
Yeah, you'd have to nerf all.
I want anyone to understand that this is not like a single instance or item. It's the entire function.
Let's be honest. Outside of assassination battles, Pokemon items are borderline. You're not seeing a lot of people forging bottles of living water for just commanders to walk around with.
The only one is Lifelines, which are just so strong.
is
Well,
what.
lifelongs are like their own category of.
Yeah, they're blood.
Yeah, they're just too cheap.
Lifelong protections would honestly probably be like okay to exist if the imps did not fly, in my opinion, or if the imps that spawn did not spawn every round but every other round. Like there should be a double. I
There's
feel like
issues with it.
Lifelong it's a special case in terms of Pokemon items where you gotta nerf. In my opinion, the flying of imps and the rate at which they spawn, and then being in blood is very strong. They're probably too cheap, honestly, for what they're giving you. So they need to at least nerf it maybe in a few ways or stick to one change and see how it's received. I wouldn't recommend them like triple nerfing it like they've done with other aspects in the game, which I think have turned out absolutely terribly. I think the change between like Zolbalba's between 4 and 5 was dramatic and it was unnecessary. They needed a nerf. That was correct, but they didn't need a triple nerf. They probably needed like a single nerf, or they should have got more feedback before they slammed the fucking nerf hammer 4 times on top of it. Like, come on.
Well, let's get back on topic. I do want to go over a couple things before we.
Good luck.
All right.
Which is like water forging. Like, I want to go back to actual forged items. We already touched on it with bottles of water, but what are some of the standouts for you guys?
Cora Blade, Frost Brand,
Water Bracelet.
Water, yeah, like any of the boosters are good.
Right.
I think they have some of the better weapons.
Good items in the path.
No,
they're good
Frost
one.
Brand is a real standout.
Very quick honorable mention to the Ice Ages, because the Ice Ages, while it's just like a regular shield, it's not special as a shield, gives you cold prot, so it is one of the few ways that you can add extra prot stacking to a build. So just want to mention that exists, although that is going to be...
what have you built that and what have you put it on?
Yeah, I've never used that. And I fucked around a lot.
You could use it like a Niflheim or something.
Yeah.
For like an Atlantis.
Maybe
I've theory crafted it. I haven't built it.
Feeling national troops that already have it on there, and that's why I always look at it like, I don't want to build it.
You could use it on old Charlie.
That's true.
Oh yeah, then you have to take
cold. If you end up in cold scales as Phlegra, which you may not be in, but if you end up in cold scales as one of the Phlegra line, then you can forge that and add extra prot stacking to your guys who can give themselves Iron Skin and have very good armor already, and just prot stack up to the moon if you want to.
If it was 5 gems instead of 10, I would use it, but at 10 gems, it's not good.
Like Demon Bane is good because it's how you inure your normal mages from getting just absolutely destroyed by flames from the sky. It's a 5 gem item, and it gives enough R and 5 HP.
Right.
It's a great item. I would absolutely say Demon Bane's worth.
What else is I thinking of?
Just to interrupt a little bit, talk about with regards to like the water bracelet and the boosters. Just so you know what we're talking about, water is one of the easiest paths to boost up because at Construction 6, there's a level 1 item, 5 gems. That's just a water booster +1, and then at Construction, I think 2 or 4, there's a Robe of the Sea, which is another water booster, which costs 15 gems, body slot. But the point is, if you have Water 2, then you have Water 4. And
if you have Water Death or Water Nature, you can Water
Sea King's Court, and then you get a Water 3 +2, that's 5.
Right.
It's pretty easy.
Then you're up the path. So...
Yeah.
If you have water even 1 at level 6, you're in the path, and if you have water 2, once you get to Construction 6, then you're like all the way up the path. You're only cut off from some of those high-end globals, which are not that good anyway. Like, you're all the way up to Water 5, and your Sea King's Court troll, can just cast Murdering Winter to its heart's content, and you can delete armies and shit.
That's like the only... I would say like it's an advantage and also a disadvantage in water. It's very easy to climb, but really, if you're climbing, you're trying to cast Murdering Winter. And like rarely for battlefield fights, Not including the underwater ones. There are some spells.
Frozen
you
Heart
can
is
get like
like
Quagmire and Grip, and that's like whatever. You could empower your Sea King and Fire to get Acid Rain, but that's crazy.
I mean, this is Alt 8 and it's not battlefield wide, but if you've ever cast Quickening, it's kind of nutty. This is a 9 AoE quickness effect. Like, it costs a gem, but if you've ever done it, it is kind of gross in those big battles.
so cheap for what it does.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, it's
Quickening
Alt 8,
If
that's
you ever
why.
want to play a game where you're like, man, I want to cast as many water spells as possible, this is a shameless plug because I like this nation. Play Joman because they have a ton of water 3 mages and they all get free gems. You can cast quickness 20 times in a battle if you want to. It's pretty cool.
We almost made it, Rob. We
No, I mentioned
almost
them
made the
earlier.
whole episode without a
He
Joman.
mentioned.
Listen, if we're talking about water mages, Raijin are probably the strongest ones.
Raijin are one of them.
Because they're as good as anybody else at casting stuff, and then they just get the free gem. So they're probably like the strongest water mages.
So to wrap it all together, because I think we're approaching a time where we need to wrap it up. I would say that looking at the water path, having water 2 as a support path is pretty strong, but having water as your main big path is pretty fucking terrible unless you are in an underwater nation v underwater nation fight.
Sure.
I still am not quite swayed, but yeah. If water's not the worst path in the game, it's probably the second worst.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
But you went on
hard
the front side, didn't you?
I think you can
Yeah,
say that
I'm pro
even
water.
if it's not the worst, it's arguably the worst.
I think cubes are so
It's an
good
argument.
that I think water is redeemed, and maybe it's because cubes are like over buffed. But
No.
I don't. If we talk about cubes too much, Winter's gonna realize what they made and actually nerf them, and then they'll be absolutely some dog summon like horned serpents, and I don't really want that.
So to mitigate that effect somewhat, let's just put in there that cubes are hard to use properly, right? And the way in which they are good is they are anti-small numbers of elites. They're an answer to small numbers of elite troops because they instantly delete them. A cube, if you run up, like, I'm going to win because I have cubes, and you run up 16 cubes against the enemy's, like, 200 infantry, they're just, like, regular-ass infantry, you're going to fucking die because your cubes are going to go forward 4 squares a turn, and then the enemy infantry are going to run behind them, kill all your mages, and your cubes are going to fucking dissolve, and everything they've eaten will just pop out. So,
yeah, cubes are very strong, but they're also very particular to use. You have to give them buffs. Unbuffed cubes are worthless, in my opinion. Some of the mentors, even on immersion, I've seen use unbuffed cubes.
You can use them versus single thugs, but that's about it.
Well, yeah, sure. Versus one guy, it's okay. But I've seen mentors just paint luck on them. I don't want to flame anyone in particular because I only saw snippets of it. But yeah, that's a pretty big no-no. I don't care how long you've been playing this game. Do not feel that. No. This is bad. It's very easy to at least give them protection.
So, Charlie and Rav, last thoughts on water?
We didn't mention it much, but aside from water elementals, there's actually a lot of other strong underwater water spells. So yeah, it's not just the water elementals. They have a ton of actual support spells underwater, and it's just really generally strong.
I think I mentioned Encase in Ice. That is why you cannot use thugs underwater, and it's because it's off scripted.
Also like Shark Attack and Friendly Currents and stuff. So
yeah, Friendly Currents, for those who don't know, is basically relief, and then Shark Attack.
No, isn't it like +5 defense on everything? Which one am I thinking?
You might be right.
Yeah, Friendly Currents is like plus defense.
Is it?
I
thought it was remake. I could be wrong.
No. Friendly Currents looks like it's fatigue and movement, maybe, and then there should be something for. I don't even know. One of these has got to be.
Regardless, it's something you cast when you're underwater. There's like only a few spells that are really competitive, and because there's so much restriction, and because there's not a lot of, there's restriction, and then the spells just aren't good. And then they completely delete thugs basically in the fight because in case Nice exists, and it's off script. It's such a tragedy. It should honestly be deleted from the game. It's so bad. But Shark Attack is something you should cast. It's basically kind of like a swarm. If you can damage the other guy's army with like foul vapors, it's a disgusting combination underwater. I highly recommend. I think it's basically friendly occurrence in Shark Attack, I believe.
All right, Charlie, any last thoughts on the water path?
Yeah, just for me, like water in particular has like best in class for certain niche counters and like certain reactionary things that you can do. But I think on its own, just in like as a general application, that's where it kind of falls a little short. And I feel like it could use a few buffs or more so a few more spells. But otherwise, like I like the summons. I like the globals. I like a lot of the forged items. Frozen Heart, like I said, is one of my favorite spells just because it's like 100 precision, AN damage, no MR check. So they have a toolbox. It's just like I don't know. I can't really. It's hard to push tempo and like in the early to mid game with just having water as your main path.
What if there was a battlefield tsunami spell or like surf spell, kind of like from Pokemon? I don't know if any of you guys have been.
Well, tsunami is already a spell. You simply have to go
in
to Evocation 9 with your Water 5 mage so that you can grief enemy provinces with minus 30%.
I think it should be a water-only Firestorm.
A battlefield wipe that did water spell like that was like a tidal wave that did a bunch of blunt damage and then also like gave drowning checks would fucking rule. And I think
I was just saying like
I would be perfectly
like
fine with like an evocation as well, which is like a crushing damage. AP
yeah, that's what I was more so saying. Like if you've ever played Quest 64, there's like some cool crushing wave attacks in that game. That's probably a throwback that no one knows, but. I don't know. I feel like that would be like a cool spell that's not really seen in Dominions when that's quite a common, I would say, a fantasy trope.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right.
So, you know how you have fire spells which like mimic what a fire elemental does? Why don't we have water spells that mimic what a water elemental does?
That's what I'm saying. Like there could be some more. All right, that's going to be it from us today for this episode on the water path. Join us next time on All Stats No Res, where we're going to be talking about all stats and no res as a bless. So join us next week.